Disclaimer. This content is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. My name is Naomi. I'm 41 years old. And I haven't said this out loud to anyone, but I think I've fallen out of love with my husband. Or maybe, more truthfully, I've fallen out of who I was when I loved him. We've been married for 17 years. His name is Richard, he's 56, and when I first met him, I thought he was the most fascinating man I'd ever encountered. He had this way of speaking about the world like he'd lived 1,000 lives. He had just come back from a long trip to Asia, Bhutan, Nepal, and Tibet, carrying this heavy camera and stories about the wisdom of women who had nothing and still smiled. I remember feeling small beside him, but in a good way. Like he had the answers and I just had to stay close enough to learn. I didn't know then that admiration could turn into silence. We live in Santa Fe now. A wide, quiet house full of muted colors and old rugs that smell like dust and sandalwood. People say it's beautiful. Peaceful. I sometimes want to set it on fire just to feel something unpredictable. Lately, we've been having dinner in silence. Not angry silence, not bored silence, just that dull kind, like we're coworkers waiting for a meeting to start. Last night, he reached across the table and touched my wrist. His fingers were warm, steady, familiar. I looked at him and smiled. But inside, I wanted to ask him, who are you touching? The woman I was, or the shell sitting in her chair now? He leaned in and kissed my forehead. Like he always does. Like muscle memory. And I swear, I flinched. I don't think he noticed. We still touch. That's not the issue. We hold hands at the farmer's market. We spoon at night. He'll press his palm to the small of my back when we're cooking. But it's like all our affection has turned into choreography. The same dance, same music, same steps. Nothing new. He used to kiss me like he was discovering something. He used to say my name in the dark like it was a prayer. Now, when he says, Naomi, I hear it as a fact. Not a feeling. I'm not blaming him. That's the part one hate the most. This isn't about blame. It's not about cheating or fighting or some big betrayal. It's slow erosion. The kind that sneaks in quietly, like water finding cracks in the foundation. And I've changed, too. I've gotten quieter. I read too much. I drink my wine earlier in the day. I find myself daydreaming, not about other men, not even about sex really, but about being desired. Being noticed. Being unpredictable. 2 weeks ago, Richard got a call from an old friend he used to travel with, a photographer named Andy. I was chopping vegetables in the kitchen, and I could hear his voice rise, full of laughter. The next day, I saw an article open on his laptop. American man over 50 makes 3 Tibetan girls pregnant, returns with twins and a spiritual rebirth. I couldn't stop staring at the headline. He caught me reading it and laughed. Crazy, right? These guys think they're still 25. Running around chasing enlightenment through young bodies. I nodded. But the next thought that hit me, and I can't believe I'm saying this, was, at least someone made him feel alive. I looked at Richard then. Same gray-flecked beard. Same quiet eyes. Same old hoodie. And I realized I hadn't been surprised by anything he'd said or done in over 5 years. And worse, I don't think I've surprised him either. The exact moment I knew something had changed. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't a silence. It was a kiss. 3 months ago, we were at a friend's gallery opening. He leaned in and kissed me, full on the lips. A little tipsy, maybe. A little nostalgic. I kissed him back because I was supposed to. But the whole time, my body felt like it belonged to someone else. My arms were stiff. My chest didn't flutter. I pulled away and smiled for the cameras. But in my head, I was screaming. I'm still screaming. Quietly. Through every polite dinner. Every forehead kiss. Every night I turn to the wall and pretend I'm asleep. Because what do you do when the person you built a life with still loves you, but doesn't see you anymore? What do you do when you don't either? Richard used to be a doctor. Not just any doctor, a traveling physician who ran medical clinics in remote places most Americans couldn't pronounce. That's how he ended up in Tibet in the first place, years before we met. He never talked about it like a conquest. But something in his eyes always shifted when he described those villages, those women, that quiet reverence of a place so far from here. I met him after he'd come home, though I never really believed he fully did. Now, in our house with adobe walls and soft rugs, he teaches part-time at the university. Talks about the ethics of field medicine and international care. His students love him, mostly younger women, I've noticed, who hang on his every word. They look at him the way I used to. He still looks at me with love. But something about it feels directional. Like it's flowing one way and expects a certain response in return. Mostly physical. Last weekend, we were folding laundry together. Something small, domestic. He held up a lacy pair of my underwear and smirked. You never wear these anymore. I laughed, but it sounded flat even to me. Maybe because no one ever notices when I do. He came up behind me then, arms circling my waist, kissing my neck like it was an answer. And maybe to him, it was. But I froze. Because I didn't want to be touched, I wanted to be understood. I wanted him to ask why I didn't wear them. I wanted him to see that I didn't feel sexy anymore. Not in this body that softened and sagged and fallen into routine. I pulled away gently and said I needed to start dinner. He didn't push. He never does. He just gave me a look, part confused, part hurt, and walked out of the room. Later that night, we lay in bed, not quite touching. He reached for me under the sheets, fingers tracing the back of my thigh like he was trying to summon a memory. I let him. I always do. But it felt like acting. Like watching someone else play the role of me being wanted. Afterward, he kissed my shoulder and whispered, "You're so beautiful." Still. Still. That word felt like a bruise. Like a footnote. Like I'd passed some invisible expiration date and he was trying to pretend I hadn't. I didn't say anything. I just stared at the ceiling fan spinning slowly in the dark and tried to remember the last time I'd felt truly desired for my mind. For my questions. For my silences. For the things I never say out loud. The next morning, I found a book on his side of the bed. One of his old travel journals. I opened it, and there it was, pages full of stories from Tibet. Long entries about the people, the landscape, the poverty, and the girls. Not sexualized, not disrespectful. Just reverent. Descriptive. Emotional. One line struck me, they carry water in silence, and somehow I feel they know more than I ever will. I closed the book quietly. Because I realized then, that part of him still lives over there, in a place I've never been, in women I can't compete with. Women who had nothing but gave everything. Women who looked at him like he was a savior. And I am just his wife. The woman who makes roasted chicken on Sundays. The woman who answers with tired smiles. The woman who sleeps beside him, stiff and wide awake. That evening, I tried to bring it up. I said, "Do you ever miss that part of your life? The places, the people?" He looked at me, surprised. Of course. But I'm here now. With you. I nodded. But are you really? Or are you just remembering what it felt like to be needed? He laughed, too quickly. What are you talking about? I need you. Every day. And then he kissed me again. Like punctuation. Like an attempt to end the conversation. But love doesn't live in gestures. Not for me. It lives in questions. In seeing the person in front of you even when they've changed. Even when they've faded. And right now, I feel like a shadow of someone he once understood. But not anymore. And I don't know how to tell him that without sounding like I'm trying to hurt him. When really, I'm just trying to find myself again. Before I disappear completely. I was slicing apples for a crumble. Something sweet to close the silence between us. Richard came up behind me, like he always does, and slid his hands around my waist. At first, I didn't react. I kept slicing. 1, 2, 3. Each motion clean, robotic. Then he kissed the back of my neck. Not softly. Purposefully. With meaning. And I felt my body go rigid. He murmured, "You smell like cinnamon." I smiled, because I was supposed to. That's the apples. His hands moved lower, resting just at the top of my hips. Familiar territory. But something in me tensed. He wasn't doing anything wrong. It wasn't rough, or rude, or entitled. It was gentle. Loving, even. And yet, I wanted to turn to him and say, "Stop touching me like this when we haven't even spoken about what's actually wrong." Instead, I dried my hands on the towel and stepped out of his arms. "Can you preheat the oven?" He looked confused, blinking like I'd short-circuited a moment. I was just, I know. I forced another smile. Just trying to get this in before the pears go bad. He didn't press. He rarely does. He turned to the stove and fiddled with the knobs while I tried to keep my chest from tightening. That night, in bed, he tried again. Not aggressively. Just, expectantly. His hand slid across the sheet and curled around my wrist. "Hey," he whispered, "you okay?" I nodded. "Just tired." "You've been tired a lot lately." I didn't respond. He leaned in to kiss me, slow, like a man with nothing to prove, and I let him. Our lips met, warm and familiar. But I felt nothing. No flutter. No pull. I opened my eyes halfway through and saw his were still closed, his brow just slightly furrowed, like he was concentrating on remembering who we used to be. He brushed his thumb over my cheek. "You're so beautiful, Naomi." It landed like a compliment I didn't earn. Like I'd accidentally fooled him into thinking I was still the same. I kissed him again, short, quick. Then rolled to my side. "I have an early meeting tomorrow," I said softly. There was a pause. Then he sighed and pulled away. The next morning, I stood at the mirror putting on mascara. He came in, shirtless, hair damp from the shower. I felt him watching me. "You never wore that blouse before," he said, smiling. I did. "You just didn't notice." His smile faltered. He came up behind me again, wrapping his arms around my middle, resting his chin on my shoulder. His fingers grazed the top of my chest, light and slow. And again, I wanted to want it. I miss wanting it. But all I could feel was my heartbeat speeding up, not with desire, but with panic. "Please don't turn this into something else. Please just see me for a second before trying to take me." He kissed the side of my neck and whispered, "I've missed this." I froze. He didn't notice. Or maybe he did and chose to keep going. Then he gave me a playful smack on the butt. A gesture that once would have made me laugh or flirt back. But now? I turned around too fast, too sharp. "I have to go." He stepped back, hands up. "Okay. Sorry. I wasn't trying to. I know what you were trying to do." My voice cracked. Not angry. Just tired. He looked down, hurt blooming across his face like a bruise. I grabbed my bag and left before I could say anything I'd regret. Or cry. Or both. In the car, I sat with my hands gripping the steering wheel and tears threatening behind my eyes. I love this man. I know I do. But every touch feels like a demand I didn't consent to. Every kiss feels like the beginning of something I don't want to finish. And I'm so tired of trying to perform desire for someone who doesn't understand what I actually need. I stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. And I thought, why does everything have to turn into sex? I should have known I wouldn't make it through dinner. Richard had made an effort, he really had. Cloth napkins, soft jazz humming from the speaker, lamb roasted just the way I liked it. He even opened the good bottle of Malbec we were saving. You deserve a night, he said, setting down the glasses. Just us. I smiled, because I was supposed to. That's how it always starts now. Me smiling. Him trying. We clinked glasses, and I said, cheers, like it didn't ache. We made it through the salad. Halfway through the lamb, he looked up and said, remember that night in Nepal, when I got altitude sickness, and you nursed me with ginger tea and crackers like some kind of warrior? I blinked. We've never been to Nepal together. I forced a laugh. I think that was someone else. He chuckled, then winced. Oh, damn. You're right. Sorry. Must have been one of the nurses on that trip. I was out of it. I set my fork down carefully. He kept eating, oblivious. Anyway, it made me realize I wanted to marry someone who had that kind of strength. You reminded me of her, actually. That's the funny part. My chest tightened. That's the funny part? I repeated. He looked up, startled. I mean, not funny like haha. Just, I don't know, the connection. I stared at him, something sour building in the back of my throat. So you married me because I reminded you of some Tibetan girl who gave you crackers? He laughed awkwardly. Don't be like that, Naomi. You know what I meant. But I didn't. Not really. Not anymore. The room felt hot, like the walls were pressing in. I took a breath, then another. And then something just snapped. You don't see me, I said, my voice trembling. He froze, wine glass half raised. You don't see me, Richard. You see the idea of me. Or worse, you see women you left behind and decided I was the closest acceptable version. A warmer version of your memories. His face shifted. From confused to defensive in seconds. That's not fair. No, what's not fair is you touching me like I'm a faucet you can turn on without asking what's dry. What's not fair is me sitting here pretending I'm okay while you daydream about places you'd rather be. He stood up then, chair scraping back hard. I cook dinner, I open your favorite wine, and I try, God, Naomi, I try. But it's never enough. You flinch when I touch you. You shut down. And now you want to accuse me of what, loving someone else? Not someone else, I whispered. Just, somewhere else. Somewhere I can't compete with. His jaw clenched. So that's what this is about? The article? The guy who had kids in Tibet? You think I'm like him? I think, I said, my voice cracking, I've been standing in this house for years, begging silently to be noticed, not as a body, or a memory, or a reflection of your past, but as a whole, flawed woman who's slipping away in front of your eyes. He stared at me. Silent. His face unreadable. I got up, pushing my chair back carefully. My legs were shaking. I don't want you to fix this. I just want you to see that it's broken. Then I left the table. I sat on the bathroom floor with my knees pulled up and my chest heaving like I'd run a marathon. My blouse was damp from where I'd wiped my eyes too many times. I kept thinking about what he'd said, about the girl in Nepal, or Tibet, or wherever she was. The one who gave him crackers. The one who, in his head, became the beginning of everything. And I thought, what if I've always been someone else's shadow in his life? What if I mistook his awe for love? I wanted to take it all back. Not because it wasn't true, but because I saw his face. And in his silence, I saw pain. I hated that I caused it. I hated that I felt guilty. I hated that I couldn't stop myself. But most of all, I hated how much I still wanted him to hold me. Just once. Without it turning into something else. Without it being about what I could give him. I curled tighter into myself. And the thought came again, hollow and exhausted, why does everything have to turn into sex? The house felt different now. It wasn't the silence, we'd had quiet spells before. But this was a silence with shape, with edges. Like something had been carved out of us and we were both pretending we didn't notice. I moved through the days and routines. I still folded his socks. Still made enough coffee for two. Still refilled the fruit bowl even though neither of us touched the apples. But we were ghosts. He didn't reach for me in bed anymore. Didn't kiss my neck in the kitchen. No more slow brushes of his hand along my back. No more soft, hey, beautiful, when I came home. I'd wanted space. Now I was drowning in it. And the thing that hurt the most was, he didn't punish me. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't storm out or guilt me. He simply stepped back. I watched him that week, more than I had in years. He looked older in the mornings, the way he rubbed his eyes, the way he lingered over the paper but didn't seem to read it. He stopped humming when he cooked. Stopped looking up when I walked into a room. One night, I found him in the garage, sitting in his old armchair surrounded by dusty camping gear, staring at an open box on his lap. I couldn't see what was in it. He didn't notice me in the doorway. Or maybe he did, and just didn't say anything. I stood there for a moment. Wanting to ask what he was thinking. Wanting to walk over, sit on the floor beside him, lean my head on his knee like I used to. But I didn't move. I just stood there in the glow of the hallway, watching the man I loved cradle a silence I helped create. That night in bed, I faced away from him, but I couldn't sleep. My body ached, not from tension, but from distance. From missing someone who was still inches away. I kept thinking, why is this so hard? Why can't I reach out first? Maybe it was pride. Or fear. Or the shame of having broken something I didn't know how to fix. Maybe it was guilt. Because I knew he'd tried. And I couldn't meet him halfway. Not then. The next morning, I woke up to find he'd made coffee. 2 mugs. But his coat was gone. He'd left a note, hiking. No signal. Back around sunset. The handwriting looked tired. Not angry. Just worn. I stared at the note for a long time. I read it 5 times before setting it down on the counter. That was the moment. When I felt it in my chest, not just the longing, but the grief. Grief for the version of us that used to be easy. I realized I missed him. Not just the things he did for me, or the way he touched me, but him. The man who listened to radio dramas on Sunday afternoons. The man who once cried during a documentary about coral reefs. The man who, despite everything, still made coffee for me. I missed his softness. And I hated that mine had disappeared. I sat at the kitchen table, both mugs in front of me, the heat fading from them slowly. My hands shook slightly as I picked one up and took a sip. It tasted bitter. But it was real. And so was the ache sitting right in the center of my chest. I had a choice now. Reach out. Or retreat completely. I stared at the trailhead guidebook he'd left on the counter, pages marked with red ink and handwritten notes about the best overlooks. I reached for it without thinking. Because maybe love wasn't about finding someone who always understood. Maybe it was about showing up again. Even after the silence. Even when you're scared. And I realized, I wasn't ready to walk away. Not yet. I heard the door open just after sunset. Boots on the mat. The long pause before he hung up his coat. That same heaviness in his footsteps. He didn't call out. He didn't look for me. He just walked through the house like a guest who wasn't sure he was still welcome. I was sitting on the living room floor, blanket wrapped around me, fire flickering low. I didn't say anything at first. Neither did he. He walked past the doorway, then stopped. His eyes found mine. Tired. Guarded. "Hi," I said quietly. He nodded. "Hey." We stayed in that fragile stillness for a few seconds too long. And then, slowly, he came in and sat across from me. Not close. But not far. "I saw your note," I said. He didn't respond. "I almost followed you." That made his brow lift. Just a flicker. "Why didn't you?" I looked down. "Because I didn't know what I'd say if I found you." His hands rubbed his knees absently, like they needed something to do. I was angry, I admitted. And I think I let it live too long in me. I've been scared of disappointing you. Or being disappointed. So I stopped showing up. He looked at me then. Really looked. "You think I'm not disappointed, too?" The honesty in his voice hit harder than any argument ever could. We sat with that. "I miss you," I whispered. "Even when you're right in front of me." His eyes went glassy, just for a second. "I miss you too." He leaned back against the couch, and after a while, opened his arms without speaking. It wasn't an invitation. It was a question. And I answered it. I crawled over and curled into his chest. He wrapped his arms around me like he used to. Not pulling, not expecting. Just holding. His chin rested on my head, and I felt the rise and fall of his breathing. That's all we did for a long time. No kiss. No heat. Just warmth. Presence. "I don't want to lose us," I murmured. "Then we have to stop pretending we're fine," he said. I nodded against his chest. "I don't need you to fix me. I just need you to see me. And ask before touching what might still be healing." "I can do that," he said. "Can you let me in when it hurts?" My throat closed up. But I nodded. "I'll try." He kissed the top of my head, soft and slow, like saying thank you. It wasn't a grand reconciliation. We didn't suddenly become who we were. But for the first time in months, I felt like we were on the same side again. Two people with broken pieces. Trying, quietly, imperfectly, to hold each other gently. That I used to think desire was about timing. About chemistry. The right candlelight, the right words, the right moment. But now I think, desire is really about safety. And not the easy kind, not the fairy tale kind where someone sweeps you off your feet and promises forever. I'm talking about the slow, unglamorous kind. The kind where you sit across from someone after months of silence, and your body says don't flinch. And it listens. Because they're still here. Even after you've disappointed each other. Even after you've pulled away. Even after you've said the ugliest thing you could think of just to test if they'll stay. Richard stayed. But that doesn't mean everything's back to how it was. We don't kiss the same way. We don't touch as often. And honestly, sometimes that still hurts. But what I've come to realize is that intimacy doesn't start in the bedroom. It starts in the pauses. In the moments when I say, "I'm not okay," and he doesn't try to fix me, just nods and makes space. It starts when I tell him I don't want to be touched, and he hears it not as rejection, but as trust. It's quiet. So quiet. Sometimes I miss the fire. The pull. But this new version of us, this slower, softer thing, it's ours. And maybe that's enough. I think I used to equate love with effort. I thought, if he's showing up, if he's cooking dinner, if he's planning trips, it means we're fine. But now I understand that someone can do everything right and still not see you. And you can love someone deeply and still not feel safe in their arms if your heart doesn't feel heard. That was the hardest part for me to admit. Because I wanted to be the woman who still swooned when he touched me. I wanted to want what he wanted. I wanted to be simple. Easy. Eager. But I'm not. And maybe I never was. I've learned that sometimes, love asks you to choose, to fake the closeness. Or to break everything open and rebuild from the inside. We broke. We're still rebuilding. And rebuilding means I have to speak when I'm scared. It means I have to say, "I'm not ready," and trust that he won't leave. It means I have to look at him with clear eyes and not as a mirror for my worth. Because he's not my validation. And I'm not his reward. We are people, flawed, bruised, trying. We are not who we were. But we're still here. And maybe that's the most honest kind of romance. I know now that healing in love isn't linear. There are days I still feel numb. Days I crave closeness but can't initiate it. Days I cry over nothing and he just hands me tea instead of a solution. And I love him for that. So if you're listening to this, and you're in that gray space, not quite leaving, not quite staying, I want you to know, it's okay to want more. It's okay to stop pretending. It's okay to say, "This doesn't feel good anymore," even if everything looks perfect on paper. It doesn't make you ungrateful. It makes you honest. And the truth is, we don't fall out of love all at once. We drift. And we either drift back toward each other with eyes wide open. Or we let the silence swallow what we once were. We chose to drift back. Slowly. Quietly. Painfully. But truthfully. And that's the kind of love I believe in now. Not the love that burns everything down just to feel something, but the love that stays in the room when everything is cracked and still says, "Let's try."